Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, give our viewers a little bit information about yourself. How did you get into law? You have an interesting story here. Fire away.
So when I was in high school, I started clerking for a divorce lawyer. So that was just go for kind of tasks, but that progressed from being a law clerk into being an associate and now eventually as a partner. So I've been with that same lawyer for a couple decades at this point.
Is that right? This whole time you've been in the same firm?
We were at a predecessor firm that merged
I
into our
see.
current firm, but I've been with the same lawyer for that whole time.
Okay. So, what drew you to law and specifically family law? What about this attracts you?
I've yet to be drawn to family law, despite where I currently
Oh,
practice, but
okay.
I've been drawn to law since I was a kid. My grandfather was a lawyer. I've always liked
Okay.
arguing with people. I like understanding rules and how they apply to certain situations. So that's what drew me to law, but family law specifically, I just fell into it as a result of that clerkship.
I
So
see.
here I am.
I see. Now, one of the things I'm most curious to ask whenever I talk to leaders is the journey from producer or widget maker, in your case, attorney, to a leader of widget makers, in your case, attorney. To go from a producer to a leader, that's a big transition. I'm curious if you could explain how you made that jump, the difficulties of that jump, the challenges of that jump of leading people. Take us through that journey.
I have somewhat of a unique experience, at least within the firm. A lot of lawyers here get hired out of law school and they start as associates. Starting from where I started, I've done every position in the lab. I've done paralegal kind of work, I've done clerk work, I've done grunt work, anything that can be done in a law firm, I
Okay.
have done it. I think that gives me an advantage in terms of leading a team because I can tell people what to do, what not to do, what to avoid, what I'm looking for, because I've done it myself, as opposed to just hopping right in at mid-level or up in the tier uh, because I was a lawyer. So I think that's a big advantage that's not often seen, at least nowadays.
Sure.
And then I think as far as like challenges go, they came with challenges that same path because since I was clerking for the same lawyer for decades, some of his staff, they see me as a kid. They see me as like
Sure.
their son. So now rising up through the ranks and having to assign tasks to those people that look at me as a kid, they're thinking of, I'm older than you and you're my boss. It's confusing to them.
Yeah.
So that's a delicate power dynamic, but it's the way the world works. I think it's a unique starting point, somewhat, at least here, but it came with advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah. Okay, so now I need to ask about that then. Tell me, how do you handle that power dynamic? You were there as a 16-year-old kid and now you're a partner. How do you handle that leadership of people who were once your senior?
Delicately.
What does that look like?
The reality is the person that I have in mind specifically
Okay,
is the assistant or the secretary to the lawyer I worked for.
okay,
And at this point, I have a secretary that works for me, so I don't cross paths very often with this particular secretary in
gotcha.
terms of needing to assign work to her. So we work in parallel, but it is still an awkward dynamic. It's one that took some time for both of us to adjust to, and I think at
Okay,
this point, we are both adjusted to it.
okay. Now, before we got online, I talked to you about this. I'm always fascinated with people, how they go from being a producer or a widget maker, in your case, an attorney, to a leader, because those are different skills. Practicing law and leading attorneys are different skill sets. Tell me, how are you honing your leadership craft, not just your craft as an attorney, but your leadership craft?
It's a work in progress. It's definitely a different role, to your
Yeah,
point. It's nowhere similar. Some arguably, at least, law school trains you to think like a lawyer, trains you to research and write pleadings and that kind of thing.
yeah,
But it's not teaching you how to lead a team.
that's right.
And unless you're going to business school or a specific kind of education, you're learning that on the job. You're learning that on the fly. And it is like I said, it's a work in progress. There's a fine line that I try to walk between assigning a task or a policy and saying, because I said so,
Right.
and explaining it and getting buy-in from the staff and the people that work on the team so that they're understanding this is why we do certain things, this is how we do certain things. And it's basically my temperament about how I walk that line, and just at some points, like anybody else, I get frustrated and revert back to because I said so, but I
Okay.
try to do that as little as possible.
Do you tend toward the directive kind of leadership rather than what we call the developmental leadership? Is that your tendency and you have to work out of that?
I do both. I've invested a significant amount of time in my primary team. Associates come and go either at the firm or on teams. Law clerks the same, but my core team, so my assistant and my paralegal,
Yeah.
have been with me for over 10 years at this point. So I've invested a lot of time and development into their skills and teaching them how to do things, and hopefully teaching them to be autonomous, but they obviously require oversight. They obviously require directives on certain things. But at least with them, the hope is that just having worked with me for so long, they know how to do things, how I like things done,
Okay.
and why we do it that way, such that they can pretty much do it on autopilot for certain kind of tasks.
Okay. How big is your firm, if you don't mind me asking?
At this point, we're about 55 lawyers and then
Okay.
maybe another 40, 50 staff.
Yeah, sure. So good size, really good size. We work with a lot of law firms here in the Pacific Northwest. And one thing that I've noticed in the law firms that we work with, and tell me if this is true with you, is even more than most industries, there's this silo effect because, as you just described, the attorney is working with their paras and their assistants and clerks and all that. And so each partner may have their own team. How do you, as a partner, coalesce and bridge that and have what do your meetings look like? How do you cast vision? How do you talk about mission? All the things firm wide. What does that look like for you and how hard is it for you?
It's a constant struggle. We
Yeah.
are siloed. We're a little different than some firms where it's eat what you kill, siloed teams. We do work as a firm collaboratively. We do work
Okay.
across teams in some situations, but we are pretty siloed, and that has positives and negatives. The negatives are that when the need arises to work across a team or bring in somebody else from a different team, they don't know how you like things done. They don't do things the same way. And so there's a learning curve, and trying to learn everybody's unique styles, it can be difficult.
Right.
There's also a sort of unspoken rule that we have 10 sort of equity teams, and within each of those teams, there's sub teams. And the way that it's supposed to work is if an equity partner brings in a case, it's that lawyer's staff that works the file, even if a partner from a different team is working on it. So that causes some complications because I've groomed my staff and I like to use my staff,
Sure.
but it's supposed to be that I'm using a different lawyer's staff if I'm
Okay.
working on their cases. So the overlap there can cause issues as far as like trial prep goes. So it causes problems sometimes, but the benefits of it usually outweigh the problems, in
Okay.
that when I work on my own cases, or to the extent I am allowed to use my own team on another partner's case, it's usually a little bit smoother.
I see. Am I hearing that each team almost operates as its own small entity and occasionally collaborates with other teams?
Yeah, there's an equity partner at the top of each of those 10 teams or so, and then
Gotcha.
within each of those, there's 3, 4 partners, junior partners, and then there's associates underneath, and paralegals and clerks and
Okay.
secretaries. So
Sure.
each of the partners in those equity teams probably have their own teams within that team. They have their own structure. But yeah, that's generally the way it works.
Okay. I guess then my next follow-up question would be, again, this is all about leadership. How well do the equity partners convene, collaborate, communicate, talk about the firm as a whole, firm health? How does that happen at the top?
We have every other year or so, we have a partner retreat where it's led by the equity partners, who
Gotcha.
they disseminate the here's how the firm is doing and directives for the firm and motivational talks and things like that. That happens at the partner level at retreats. And
Okay.
then a couple times a year, there's like an all firm meeting where you bring in the staff, and we have a similar but less high level in terms of revenue of the firm and costs of the firm, but more about just like general policy and giving everybody a boost about day-to-day morale and things like that.
Gotcha. What's the biggest challenge? Like one of the things we teach in all the companies we work with is creativity and innovation and collaboration. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the law firms we work with stay pretty focused on their skill set, and there's not a lot of creative conflict around innovation and creativity. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, we stay in our lane. We don't stray too much from family law. We used to have different departments and things like that, but not, at this
Okay.
point, we are family law focused.
Okay.
But I think just in general, if you want like a challenge, and I don't know that creativity applies all that often in what we do. I think on
Yeah.
the micro level, maybe it does in terms of case strategy, because in a
Okay.
divorce, every case is different. Everybody's facts are different. Everybody's families are a little bit different. But at the firm level, we tried different things as far as we implemented something called the Beermann College recently, where it's basically
Okay.
from the top down education to associates about like the nuances of trial practice and
There you
evidence
go.
and the law. So that's something we've tried recently. I think that falls in the creativity bucket.
Yeah, for sure it
Um,
does. And is
so
that within the organization?
yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic. Because my follow-up question was going to be, since 2019, 2020, the talent market has just radically changed. So there's had to be some sort of innovation or creativity on how we recruit talent, how we onboard, how we hire, all the things regarding the talent pool. How have you approached talent?
it apparently it's a hard market to find talent. I know a number of lawyers in small firms that have been looking for an associate for a long period of time, and they're posting job boards and
Yeah.
whatever, and they find nothing. Maybe it's the luxury of being in a bigger firm, but I haven't seen that myself.
Okay.
We just took on 7 new associates that are newly past the bar. So we're growing pretty steadily, but it's a different mindset. It's a different market. It's the lawyers that are coming out of law school. A lot of them haven't done a clerkship or like an apprenticeship. A lot of them don't know where court is, because since they've been
Yeah.
involved, everything's been Zoom. So they don't know how
Yeah.
to do a lot of the stuff that, you know,
Okay.
we would have learned otherwise.
Okay. That brings up another question. And I think you may have already answered it. How are you then changing your training platforms, your onboarding, everything about building within the organization now? Tell me more about that kind of leadership.
Yeah, we've moved a little bit more back towards in-person court appearances, but we're still
Okay.
stuck in this sort of hybrid Zoom age. And so
Yeah.
it gives us the ability to have clerks and new associates sit in the conference room when we have hearings or when we have trials, so that they're absorbing this is how it works. And then certainly something I try to do is if I have an in-person hearing or trial, I'll just grab as many people as I see on the way out the door in the bullpen of law clerks and associates and say, come watch, because I think that you learn by watching, you learn by
Okay.
doing. And a lot of lawyers just, especially at a smaller firm, they don't have the luxury of being able to watch a bunch of different lawyers do a bunch of different things and try to pick and choose and learn a little bit from
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. That sparks another question I have. How do you develop future leaders at the firm? What does that look? How do you mentor or coach? What does that look like for you guys?
I used to be more, maybe patient is the right word. I used to invest more time into mentoring than I currently do, and I need to be doing more of it. That is the role that I'm in, is mentoring and
Yeah.
grooming.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think, comes from what I currently do is I have a team meeting either every other week, ideally every week, but that's hard to do sometimes. And we'll run through my entire case list. And so everybody in the room is hearing what's going on with the file, what the strategy is, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. And I think for the younger associates or the law clerks that are going to be lawyers at some point in the room, they're getting a lot from those meetings. They're hearing how we strategize, how the business end of the practice is handled as far as like collecting on receivables and things like that and marketing. I try to talk about all the different aspects of the practice as opposed to just coming in with blinders and saying, do this, do that.
Fantastic. One of the things I love to challenge my clients with, and I'm gonna pitch this to you and let me know what you feel about this, is Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book back in the day, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's the idea that being a producer or a hard worker at a certain level won't take you to the next level. You've been doing this a long time, since you were 16. You're still a young guy. I'm curious, what do you believe or know needs to change about your thinking, your approach to life, how you manage time, how you lead others? What do you think may need to change in how you lead your life to get to your next level, whatever that is?
I think time management is important. I think networking is important. And along the lines of things they don't teach you in school is how to produce business, how to originate business,
Yeah.
how to network and meet people and get referrals. That's a work in progress. That's something I need to work on.
Okay.
So certainly that.
Okay. I guess a follow-up question to that would be, one of my favorite questions that I ask clients is, how do you get in your own way? How do you trip yourself up, if you could be so bold as to answer that question?
Until recently, I just did very little networking. I'm
Okay.
allergic to that name tag. I walk into
Okay.
a big conference room and just spark a conversation with anybody. That's hard
Okay.
for me to do. So I get in my own way because I either don't do that or I go to those events and I talk to somebody I already know, or I talk to a
Okay.
judge I already know. But what I've done as of late is I've found my own way. Maybe I'm
Okay.
not networking by walking into a huge conference center, but I'm doing one-on-one networking that I think
Okay.
is more productive.
Yeah.
And in my case, it's more efficient. And I'm starting to create my own path as far as networking goes.
Good. I think we all have that fear to a degree, the fear of looking foolish. Or are you an introvert by nature?
About as introverted as it gets.
Okay, so am I. I can relate to that. And yet it's called upon us to be the face of our firms, et cetera. How do you deal with that fear inside of you? How do you wrestle with that? I'm curious, because all of us leaders have it. Everyone watching this is going to say, I can relate to that. So how do you wrestle with that fear?
I don't know that I would classify it as a fear so much as
Okay.
just it's discomfort. They
Okay.
say an introvert draws energy from time that they're by themselves, whereas an
Yeah.
extrovert, they energize themselves in a
Yeah.
party.
That's right.
But I'm soft spoken by nature.
Okay.
I'm not the loudest person in the room, but being a trial lawyer requires you to do a lot of talking, a lot of extemporaneous
Sure.
speaking, a lot of boisterous argument, and it's trial by fire. I've learned by doing that. So that certainly helps, I think.
Okay. Good. What would you say are the most important qualities a leader should cultivate in today's business climate?
I think networking, I think
Yeah.
learning
Good.
how to generate business, and I think this may fall in the category of networking, but I think trying to stay top of mind with, I think there's cultivators as far as client goes, there's grooming. I think there's different kinds of methods of originating business. And I think finding new business is one avenue, but the other is retaining old business. So finding a way to stay top of mind with old clients or finished cases, whether that be reaching out to them socially or even something like congratulating them on a milestone or wishing them a happy birthday or things like that,
Good.
I think is an important skill set that obviously falls outside of what you're taught in school at all. So I think that's important.
Earlier in our conversation, you talked about time management as being something you want to work on, and you just sparked something for me. I'm picturing three major areas of time for you: the practice of law, the leading of your team, and the marketing of the firm, the being the face of the firm. How do you divide those three things? Give me a percentage of those three areas of energy.
Um, it's a good question. Lately, I've been putting a ton of time into marketing.
Okay.
So it's probably two-thirds of my time
Oh,
right now.
wow. Okay.
So that's a lot of time.
That's a
Um,
lot. Yeah.
Up until 3 months ago, I would say it was maybe 10% of my time marketing, 50% of my time trying cases, litigating, and then 40 or so to leading
Okay.
the team. But now it's probably 60 on marketing and maybe 30 to 20 to 30 on trying cases and practicing law, and then the rest on
Okay.
team management.
Okay. Gotcha. What advice would you give to emerging leaders that are just beginning to start their leadership journey? you hire some great attorney, and you not just see that they're great at the practice of law, but you can see they're maybe have a partner capabilities. What advice would you give that young person?
I try to give advice in the categories that they don't teach you in school. When I have a new associate that I'm working with, I will try to give unsolicited advice about here's a way to start building your book of business. Here's a way to start finding clients, even if they're smaller clients, to just hopefully snowball into bigger clients and more clients. Here's a way of marketing yourself, whether you're comfortable with networking events or not. So I tried to impart some of the things that I've stumbled through over the last decade or so without any direct teaching, and try to regurgitate that to try to help people skip some of the stumble steps and succeed on their own.
Good. What are you looking forward to in 2025? Any big
Uh,
things, big goals, big vacations?
I, I I don't have any big vacations planned yet. I'd like to go to Greece. That would be on the
Nice.
radar if I can. I've got a couple big cases that are coming up.
Okay.
Those are on the 2025 radar. And then hopefully this huge marketing push that I've been doing over the
Yeah.
last few months, I'd like to
Yeah.
see that pay off by way of client origination.
Very good. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. How can people get in touch with you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've got a website, steelefamlaw.com. It's got links to my bio, my social
Okay.
handles, and all my contact information.
And we'll put that for our viewers and listeners. We'll put all that in the show notes so you can look up Jonathan and his firm. Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your time and experience with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.